On January 9th, 2022, a hotel security officer entered room 962 at the Ritz-Carlton in Orlando and found Bob Saget unresponsive in his bed. He had performed a stand-up show the night before, posted on Twitter afterward, happy and grateful, gone to his room, and sometime in the early hours of the morning, slipped and hit the back of his head, thought nothing of it, and went to sleep. He never woke up. Danny Tanner was dead at 65, and the Full House family, a cast that had been through almost everything together, was about to face something they couldn't script their way out of. Full House ran from 1987 to 1995, 8 seasons, 192 episodes, a house in San Francisco that became one of the most familiar addresses in America, and a cast that felt, to an entire generation, less like people on TV and more like people you actually knew. A prison sentence, a scandal that shook Hollywood, twin girls who built an empire by disappearing, and a loss that nobody saw coming. 38 years since the pilot. Here's exactly where they all are now. 1. Bob Saget, Danny Tanner. He was the heart of the house. Danny Tanner, warm, reliable, devoted to his 3 daughters, was one of the most beloved TV dads in history. And Bob Saget, off-screen, was his exact opposite. One of the most aggressively blue comedians of his generation. The same man who hosted America's funniest home videos with that wholesome grin went out at night and did shows that would have made Danny Tanner pass out. He loved the contradiction. On January 8th, 2022, he performed in Jacksonville, called it one of the best shows of his life on social media, drove to Orlando, checked in, and sometime before dawn fell and struck the back of his head. The autopsy found multiple skull fractures at the base of the skull and the roofs of both eye sockets, bleeding on the brain. The force was compared to high-speed accident trauma. No drugs, no alcohol, just a fall in a dark hotel room, alone. Bob Saget was 65 years old, married to Kelly Rizzo, whom he'd called the great love of his life. 3 years into what he described as the happiest chapter he'd ever lived, still performing, still hungry. John Stamos found out at 2 a.m. from a text. He said he threw up. He called it the worst night of his life. The cast gathered, grieved, and carried on because that's what Bob would have wanted, and because the love that built the show was bigger than any one loss. But grief wasn't the only storm this cast had weathered. Because years before Bob Saget's death, another member of this family walked into a courthouse and changed everything. 2. Lori Loughlin, Aunt Becky. She was the cool aunt. Becky Donaldson, later Cassopolis, arrived in season 2 and immediately made everything warmer. Lori Loughlin, in real life, was widely regarded as one of the kindest people in the cast, which is why 2019 hit so hard. In March of that year, federal prosecutors announced the Varsity Blues College admissions scandal. 50 parents charged, and among the most prominent names, Lori Loughlin and her husband Massimo Giannulli. The allegation: they had paid $500,000 to get their 2 daughters admitted to USC as recruits for the rowing team. Neither daughter had ever rowed. Photos were staged. The money ran through a fake charity. They fought the charges initially, walking into federal court holding hands. Then, in May 2020, they pleaded guilty. Lori served 2 months in federal prison. Massimo served 5. The marriage that survived the public scandal couldn't survive what came after it privately. In October 2025, after 28 years together, they separated. Sources said she never fully forgave him for spearheading the scheme. She felt he got her involved, a source told Us Weekly. In early 2026, she is reportedly dating again, returning to Hallmark, and described as really happy. John Stamos said publicly, All the hardships she's been through are connected to this guy. The cast stands with Aunt Becky. From a prison sentence to the man who never really left, never aged, and somehow just keeps getting more projects. 3. John Stamos. Uncle Jesse. Have mercy. Uncle Jesse. Leather jacket, perfect hair, drums with the Beach Boys, inexplicably lives in the attic, became one of the defining male icons of 90s television. And John Stamos at 62 is still, infuriatingly, one of the best-looking men in Hollywood. He was married to Rebecca Romine from 1998 to 2005. She went on to marry Jerry O'Connell, a dynamic that produced years of awkwardness, until November 2025, when O'Connell publicly announced they'd made peace. Stamos married Caitlin McHugh in 2018, became a first-time father at 54, and has described his son Billy as the role he was always best suited for. In 2026, he is everywhere. The Hunting Wives Season 2 on Netflix. The horror comedy drag, where he deliberately plays a villain to subvert the Uncle Jesse trust. A memoir, If You Would Have Told Me, candid about addiction and loss. 8 years of marriage celebrated in February 2026. Uncle Jesse found his Becky. It just took a while, like from the man who never left, to the 3 women who grew up in that house, each of them in a completely different direction. 4. Candace. Cameron Bure, DJ Tanner. She was 11 when Full House began. DJ Tanner, like the responsible eldest, the one who held things together, and Candace Cameron Bure has essentially been that person in real life too. She married hockey player Valeri Bure in 1996. 3 children. A marriage approaching 30 years. A faith she has been consistently, sometimes controversially, vocal about. Her 2022 move from Hallmark to Great American Family, citing a preference for traditional marriage content, ignited headlines and a public friction with Jodie Sweetin. It has since settled. They keep showing up for each other anyway. In 2025, her daughter Natasha married Disney Channel actor Bradley Stephen Perry. In May 2026, Candace announced she is going to be a grandmother. She's already chosen her name, Candy Graham. The woman who grew up as America's responsible big sister is preparing for the next chapter, as loudly and faithfully as she has done everything else. DJ had it figured out early. Stephanie had a harder road and came out of it with a story that deserves to be heard. 5. Jodie Sweetin. Stephanie Tanner. How rude. She was 5 years old when Full House began, 13 when it ended, and then the cameras went away, and with them, the structure, the identity, the only life she'd ever known. Jodie Sweetin has spoken openly about developing a serious methamphetamine addiction in her 20s, written about it in her memoir, Unsweetened, in 2009. The transition from child star to anonymous adult, with no structure and no sense of identity, was the beginning of a spiral she didn't know how to stop. 4 marriages, public struggles, a level of honesty about all of it that has made her somehow more beloved than ever. She got sober, she rebuilt. Fuller House brought her back from 2016 to 2020, and she was magnificent in it. In 2025 and 2026, she is working, active at conventions and charity events, and still speaking openly about mental health and recovery. Jodie Sweetin is 44 years old. She is sober. She has never pretended to be anyone other than exactly who she is, which turns out to be more than enough. And then the youngest Tanner daughter. Except there were 2 of them, and they became something nobody in Hollywood history had quite seen before. 6. Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. Michelle Tanner. One character played by 2 people. They were 9 months old when Full House began. They grew up entirely in public, and at 18 simply decided not to be famous anymore. When Fuller House launched in 2016, all cast members returned. The Olsen twins did not. They declined politely and said nothing further. Their co-stars were gracious. Their absence was noted. That was that. What they built instead is remarkable. The Row, their luxury fashion label, is now one of the most critically respected high-end brands in the world. Not the Olsen twins fashion line, just The Row. In November 2025, they appeared at the CFDA Fashion Awards, one of their rare public moments where they were honored as American Accessory Designers of the Year. Mary-Kate stepped to the microphone. "To our amazing customers who give us the opportunity to do what we love, thank you." They wore matching outfits. They were briefly the Olsen twins again, then went home. Two girls who grew up in front of everyone, who chose the moment they were old enough to choose to grow the rest of the way up in private, and who turned that privacy into an empire. From the girls who built an empire by disappearing, to the two people who never really needed the spotlight and showed up every week anyway. 7. Dave Collier and Andrea Barber, Joey and Kimmy. Dave Collier, Joey Gladstone, the comedian, impressionist, 27 years old when Full House began, and he has never really stopped being the funniest person in the room. He married Melissa Bring in 2014 and has remained one of the most active members of the Full House family at conventions and reunions ever since. He was one of the first to speak publicly after Bob Saget died. "We have been through everything together," he said. "Births, deaths, marriages, divorces. We are a real family, on and off camera." He released an album of original music in 2024. Joey Gladstone always did have a thing for performance. Andrea Barber, Kimmy Gibbler, technically a recurring character, but so essential to the show that her presence is simply assumed. When Full House ended, she stepped away entirely. Went to college, got married, had 2 children, lived quietly for 20 years. Then Fuller House called. She came back. Kimmy Gibbler was exactly as she had left her, loud, loyal, completely herself. In 2026, Andrea hosts a podcast, stays close with the cast, and speaks openly about anxiety and mental health. She wrote a memoir. She is a full person, not just a punchline, and she always was. The family Full House built is still standing, but one member of it is no longer here, and what the others carry for him doesn't get lighter. 8. What they carry. 4 years after Bob Saget's death, his castmates are still talking about him. Stamos says he thinks about him every day. Candace says the loss still catches her off guard. Jody says the grief lives alongside the gratitude for the years they had. In January 2026, several cast members marked the 4-year anniversary publicly. They posted. They remembered. They showed up for each other, the way this cast has always shown up for each other, through prison sentences and divorces and addiction and death, and every ordinary Tuesday in between. Full House was a show about a family assembled from grief, friendship, and necessity. A dad who lost his wife. 2 men who said yes. 3 daughters who grew up loved. The cast built the same thing. Not by design, just by showing up again and again for 38 years. Whatever happened to predictability? Apparently it ended in a hotel room in Orlando in January 2022. And everything since has just been the people who loved him figuring out how to carry that.